That is how we roll. Oh, God. This has probably been rolling that whole time.
Well, yeah, you told me to get up, push the button. I was going to think I pushed the button.
Make some more shit
Maybe
up.
I should check.
Yeah, check and see if you push the
I
button.
know I pushed the button, but...
It's like checking to see if you left the iron on.
Once it doesn't take the first time. Even if you did it, it doesn't count.
It is going.
It doesn't
All right,
count until you
there
do
is
it first.
Minute and 4
zero
seconds.
chance I'm editing that out. Zero chance that that's getting edited out. So hi, welcome back to Book Babble. You can tell once we get to about the fourth one of the night that Melissa and I start getting punchy.
I need my security pillow.
She
want a
needs
pillow?
her emotional support pillow.
Okay.
So I'm your host, John Hartness. I am the founder and publisher of Falstaff Books. Joining me, as always, with her emotional support pillow.
Have to.
With her emotional support pillows, that's not a boob euphemism. I mean, it is now. But...
Can't win.
Nope. Is Melissa McArthur. Say hi, Melissa.
Hi, Melissa.
And joining us this evening, again, live from Saga 2020, the man, the myth, the very nice hair.
I know, right?
Yeah, you look very spiffy.
It's very, like...
And the
today.
tweed. Ed Schubert, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, it's all about the tweed, isn't it?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, well,
I rest my case.
fuck it, it's my con. It's also my room.
And it's your show, and it's your publishing house.
All of those things.
I can go
It's
now.
even my phone. So, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
We tore you away from BarCon for a few minutes to get you to talk about books, which is so hard to get authors and editors to do. So why don't you tell our dozens and dozens of subscribers a little bit about yourself.
A little bit about myself. All right. I read shit. I write shit. I took a break to study reading and writing shit, and now I'm plugging back into my people, which I'm very happy to do. I mainly a short story writer and editor. I've published about 50 short stories in various magazines and anthologies over the years. Some mysteries, which is where I started. More science fiction and fantasy. Have a thing for the Twilight Zone. I grew up with that as a kid, so I'm kind of in that vein. Did publish one novel. Got turned in 2006, as Alan Wold put it at the time, to the dark side, and I became an editor. So I had been editing some business magazines for a little while, just because it pays better. And Orson Scott Card asked me to take over Intergalactic Medicine Show, his online magazine. And I did that for about 10 years. And then a variety of things happened in my life. The 2015 Hugo insanity with the sad puppies and the angry puppies and all of that got really ugly. I never would have thought for a moment if you had told me that I would be nominated for a Hugo, and it would have been the most miserable fucking experience of my entire life. That I couldn't even imagine how that would have been possible, but it was. And then shortly after that, my managing editor at the magazine, who was like my big sister, I loved her dearly, passed away to cancer, and it spread into her lungs, and she didn't last much longer beyond that. And it just sort of seemed like a very natural point for me to take a reset. So I went back to school, got my MFA, which was an interesting experience. And during that time, I was completely away from the science fiction and fantasy community. I couldn't do that and keep a job and do all of the things that I needed to do. But now I've graduated, and we're going to be working together on a line of books. And
Yeah, we missed you.
I'm as happy as I can be to be
Glad to have you back.
with my people, with my tribe. Sometimes leaving a thing is the surest way to realize how much you missed it.
What is it that they say when you let something go, if it comes back, it was meant to be?
Well, apparently I was meant to be, because I came back and y'all are stuck with me again.
And
Awesome.
now that he's back with his people, eventually he'll remember that we don't wear jackets. And we'll get back to the old Ed the old Ed wear.
I've had a pile of people wonder where the dashiki is, and a couple of people say that it took them a few minutes to recognize me without it. But
Yeah.
I'm really glad that I did it. I actually read some books I never would have read, and learned an awful lot in the process. I'm glad to have done it, and I'm even gladder to be back.
Well, we're glad to have you. So, what we do here on Book Babble is we bring in writers and we get them to talk about books. I know, it's tough gig. So, tell us about a book that you have loved for a long time, or a book that has influenced you in some way.
So I was thinking about this a little bit, and I think the book that I want to mention right now is a book that I've probably read 5 or 6 times, and it was the first thing that I read after I graduated. One of the things that I said to myself as I was in my final stages of the MFA program was I was really looking forward to being at a place where I chose what I wanted to read instead of having them assigned to me.
Oh yeah.
So my wife and I went to Smith Mountain Lake for about 2 weeks to just put our feet up and relax. And the book that I took with me that I read very quickly was On the Beach by Neville Shute.
Okay.
It is
I don't know that one at all.
It is an old post-apocalyptic doomsday that was written, I believe, in 1956 by an Australian who generally is not known for science fiction and fantasy, but there is a whole collection of books. Alas, Babylon is better known because it was an American book, that were written by people in the 1950s and the 1960s when nuclear Armageddon was a very real possibility. It was tangible to those people in a way that I don't think we could ever, hopefully, replicate again.
Yeah.
And the angst and the emotion that underrode all of that was absolutely palpable, and it's a really compelling book. The story is that the world has had its big atomic war, and that the winds are basically moving the radiation around the globe, so the entire planet is irradiated beyond a point where it can be inhabited at all, except for Australia. And as the radiation sort of sinks lower and lower, Australia becomes uninhabitable, and eventually, I believe it's Melbourne, is the last major city literally on the planet, and they know it's coming, and there's nothing they can do about it but wait for it to arrive. It was made into a movie in the 50s, I believe, starring Gregory Peck, and it's dark and inevitable, but at the same time it just sort of says something about human beings that is just, I don't know, very relatable.
Does it have a happy ending?
No, it doesn't.
Good, because it sounds like that would be complete bullshit.
Right,
It would have been. It would have been completely false, and the truth of it. So there was an American submarine that was based there, and so there was an American sort of presence, which is, I think, why they probably made a movie out of it for Hollywood, but just an immensely powerful book. And that was the thing that I said, this is going to be the first thing that I go back to when I read again. When I'm choosing what I'm reading, this is where I want to start with. So I read that. That was it was every bit as powerful as I remembered it.
I probably would have gone Christopher Moore. So what's a recent book that you've really enjoyed?
So a recent book, I actually read a lot more nonfiction now than I do fiction anymore. Honestly, most of the fiction I read at this point is mostly stuff that's been written by friends, because I want to be able to say to them, hey, I enjoyed, and I say this with an absolute 100% straight-faced sincerity. I read some of the early Quincy Harker stuff, and I really, truly enjoyed it.
Oh, well, thank you. I really appreciate
did.
that.
Non-fiction-wise, which is what I read a lot of, I actually am just starting for the second time, because I enjoyed it so much, a book by a woman named Lisa Crone called Wired for Story. And
That's really good.
It's amazing. I've recommended it to a number of other writers who are like, oh yeah. And it's basically the neurology behind how we respond to story. In the last 10 or 15 years, they've been putting people in these fMRI machines and getting them to read things and watching what parts of their brain light up and why people react to story the way that they do. And it's fascinating stuff just on its own self. But if you're a writer, it's immensely helpful, because it puts you in a position to understand why people react to things the way they do and how they react, and then how you can go about creating and crafting the reaction that you want in your reader, because ultimately to me that is what powerful fiction does, is it creates a reaction in a reader. And the more tools we have to be intentional about how we go about creating that, the better writers I think we're going to be.
It's kind of like if you had Blink and Tipping Point and they had a like literature love child.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm in.
Fascinating.
Yeah, you'd love it.
Melissa knows all too well my love
Yeah.
for all things Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've read a pile of his books too.
Yeah.
Not recently, but yeah.
I haven't gotten into the last one yet. Don't talk How to Talk to Strangers, but
Neither have I.
but I love Blink and Tipping Point. So
Outliers is a good one.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. I
Absolutely.
think that one might be my favorite.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So Wired
There
for
we go.
Story.
Wired for Story. Absolutely.
Cool. Well, where can people find out more about you?
About me, well, there's edmundrschubert.com. There is a Wikipedia page if you want to go take a look at that. You can look me up on Wikipedia. And before too much longer, there will be a bio on Falstaff Books, where I am
That's
very
correct.
happy to be contributing some work. So those would be the three places I would start.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank
This is usually the time where I shake hands, but we're still trying not to transmit plague, so we'll just rub elbows.
Touch your pillow.
Oh, whoa, now it's not that kind of show. All right. Till next time, you keep your fingers off of other people's pillows. Bye.